Questions? Yeah, that's
Recording in progress.
are we all ready? Okay, well, good morning once again. It is now 10:01. I want to welcome all of you to the San Luis County Board of County Commissioners, acting in the capacity as the Board of Human Services. I'm calling this meeting to order. Please rise for the invocation. Commissioner Luis.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, for bringing us together to do your work in our community. We thank those that are underserved, and we appreciate those that are undervalued in our community. The Department of Human Services and the work that they do is invaluable for the community, for those that are less than fortunate than the rest of us. We thank them for their services that they provide to our community, and we hope you keep them in your precious name and protect them, Lord. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Tony Haas, please lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Mr. Dornica.
Commissioner Luis Lopez. Here. Commissioner Hess. Here. Commissioner Felix.
Here. Approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda, Mr. Erica?
Commissioners, the only thing I ask today is our item 2, consideration of minutes, regular meeting September 2022, for those in November. We'll catch those up in drafts are not completed at this time. Other than that, I have no changes.
Okay. Take a motion to approve the agenda change.
Move for approval of the agenda without correction.
Second motion.
Commissioner Luis Lopez. Commissioner Hess. Yes. Commissioner Felix.
Yes. Item 2 is item 3, director reports. Mr. Erica.
So Commissioner, we're a little light today. We've got a supervisor who's out for personal matter, and then one of our other supervisors is dealing with a crisis right now. So we wish that one dealing with the crisis the best right now is a pretty hefty one for us. And so as far as director's report goes, the only thing I wanted to update the board on was we recently, Adult Living Services, and specifically Adult Protective Services, just completed their annual ARD review. It is a review done by the state to audit our case files, to do a random selection of certain case files, to deem whether or not we're in compliance with state and federal legislation. I'm happy to report to the board that we did very well on the ARD review this year. There were just some minor areas of increased documentation, but other than that, the APS team did really well in that review. So kudos to Ms. Reno and our team for getting that taken care of.
Well, congratulations, and pass on our appreciation to that team, to all of you.
Outside of that, I have no other updates at this time specifically.
Okay, so we're going to go to section 4, for a consideration of caseload counts and activity by program, adult services.
So Commissioners, again, Ms. Ringo's out. I will show you do have a copy of the updated numbers. I do want to point out there's a significant decrease in our August to September in our single entry point services. Those cases have fallen off, and unfortunately, I will report to the board that many of those have been unfortunate losses of those clients to our community, either through death or moving out of town. So we see the decrease there, but we continue to receive referrals daily, so I do anticipate that number to jump back up shortly. Outside of that, are there any questions on those numbers?
No, sir, I think you covered that in the second year, guys.
It is unfortunate, Commissioner. We've seen a lot of passing of our clients recently. We're not sure why, because we are an aging community, and I want to point that out. We continue to see more and more folks hitting that age of need, and our team is extremely overwhelmed right now, both in SEP and APS, and so we're trying our best to keep up with those. 2 years ago when I came in, almost 3 now, our APS team would maybe see 1 or 2 referrals a week. We're getting up to 6 to 7 to 8 now. So we're seeing a lot of trouble in the adult protective service realm, and we continue to struggle with staffing in that realm too. It's a very difficult job. We recently lost a case manager to another position out of town, and so right now we've got 1 case supervisor, and they have to have K-8 supporting that program. And they're holding their own, but it is going to become a little bit more difficult. We've had positions open in there since January, and I feel like he's been in a position.
Thank you.
Administrator did provide APS numbers. Those are not in your packet, so we will update next month with those APS numbers.
We have TAS, APS, is that right?
Do you have them in there?
For September.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, no, we don't have anything over here.
Yes, so we'll get those to you at next month's meeting. Other than that, any questions on adult services? Child support, please have one.
Morning.
Good morning.
Today for the child support, I just wanted to mention real quick that our collections were up, and a lot of that was due to the FEMA refunds. We were able to intercept those, so we did. I believe we had like 95 that we intercepted. They may not have been the full amount, but on 95 cases we did collect on them.
Good.
Today I wanted to talk a little bit about our review and adjustment process. On our review and adjustment process, we can do those either administratively, judicially, or the parties can do it privately by filing in court directly. In that particular case, we would not be involved. The reviews can be done every 3 years. Excuse me. They can be done every 3 years, or if there is a change in circumstance. So if there's some kind of ongoing change in circumstance that would affect the child support, they can request a review. The review would have to be done in writing, and then the requesting party would have to provide us with an affidavit with their income and expense affidavit, so that we can continue with or move forward with the review. Once we move forward with the review, we would notify the non-requesting party. They would have 20 days to provide us with their affidavit. We would then do a calculation. After the calculation, both parties would have 15 days to respond. Once the 15-day time period is up, we would move forward. If the parties agree, we would file it in court. Then we would move forward with enforcing the order. If they disagree on a judicial order, we would file a motion in court, and then the party that disagrees would have to file a response in court in order to get a hearing.
How many of those do you have specifically enforcement? Are they frequent?
We usually have a minimum of 8 going at one time. Sometimes we'll have up to, like, depending on if there's a change in law, like 25 of them going at once. And they're pretty lengthy. So we always have several of them going. Yes, Pam gets the referrals when there's no agreement, so she has to file motions in court. So if they file a response, then a court hearing will be set. If if we don't get any response at all, and it's an administrative hearing or negotiation conference, then we would just file a default order. If there's no response from either party and it's judicial, we would have to file a motion. Once the order is signed by the judge, whether there's a hearing or not, then we would get a copy of the order and then move forward in enforcing the order. Any questions?
Sounds pretty interesting. No, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. That's quite good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And then next we have, I'd like to announce Ms. Mary Dean on our new supervisor for child welfare and child protective services.
Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll just quickly go over our numbers. As you can see, You can see that we're staying pretty consistent as the monthly referrals that we have coming in. We've had a decrease in the number of children that we were servicing in-home, which is good. Which also, I think we did have also a decrease in our children in out-of-home placement. So that's when we usually do like our happy dance, because that means that case was successful. Whether the kids were successfully returned home or because we reached some other permanency. In this particular case, we had actually kids that returned home to their parents. So we get really happy and excited about that. Now, I do want to point out that the number of children served, that's probably not an accurate number because I was not counting our referrals and kids that we served during the referral. So from this time forward, those numbers will be higher. So, any questions about the numbers?
So we're looking at, you're referring at the 28 that we have currently, 28 children that are being served, but all the other ones that you have in contact with should also be part of this.
Right, they should be, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the numbers?
So one of the questions I make myself with a note on the children that were placed on the kingship care. How long, I mean, I guess my question is, what is the success rate? Once they are placed there, do they ever return? Do you continue to service those?
So we do, when they're in kinship care, we treat them no different than we would treat kids in foster care. We prefer to place in kinship care whenever possible, and the state as a whole has recognized that kids are actually more successful when they're with family than when they're placed with strangers, and that's why we have the family first, and the big push is to place with family whenever possible.
So the process for a family of kinship versus a non, it's pretty much the same, they've got to go through the verification process?
No.
So, yeah, it varies. If you have, say you identify a grandparent that wants to be a placement option for a kid, they have the option to not be certified. We still have to do background checks, court checks, we have to do trails checks. We have to visit the home, make sure that the home is appropriate, the basic stuff. But we don't necessarily have to certify them, so they don't have to go through all of the state training that a certified foster care would. So, and to get certified is quite lengthy. It's very, we do very in-depth home studies, and we dive into every part of their life that we can, because our ultimate goal is to always make sure that whenever we're placing kids, that we're placing them in a safe environment from where safely and what we remove them from.
Of the children that you serve, how many are allowed? And what role does DHS play on the adoption process?
So, what did I report that we had eight adoptions since last November, and I just completed 2 more successful adoptions earlier this month, and then we have another case coming up for adoption now in November. So it varies. So we probably have, this is the largest amount of adoptions that we've done in a year's time. And I think that's just because, the complexity of the families that are coming in. A lot of families that don't have good supports through their own family that we can identify these children with. So exact numbers, I couldn't tell you. I'd have to go back in and look to see. So it varies from case to case.
even one child that's being adopted is a success.
Yes.
A permanent place for that child to be raised is a success in life. So even one is a great point.
Right, it is. I look at it as like a bittersweet because, yeah, you know, in order to get adopted, you have to have a termination of those parental rights. And so, which is unfortunate. But, I mean, we have kinship that will adopt. And so the younger the children are, the more we push for that adoption rather than permanent placement or guardianship because it's more permanent for that child. When kids are older, those children actually have a role in what their permanency is. So if you have, you know, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old, they can choose whether they want to be adopted or not.
It still takes a special person or people, man and woman, to take on that responsibility. When you're not the biological parent. So I applaud everyone that moves forward with that. I'm so thankful that we have those people in this community who take on the responsibility for something that is not theirs and take on their own. They're being taught. So thank you guys for your efforts. Like I said in my prayer this earlier today, thank those of you at DHS that help those that are underserved and need these services for this.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, I always praise our kinship and our foster families because, you know, they take in these kids and they take them in just as a kid themselves and their developmental milestones. But they also have to deal with their stuff that they come with. And they deal with them on a daily basis. You know, I, as a caseworker, you know, I'm only required to see them once a month, or as issues come up, and I really have to deal with that. But foster parents and kinship parents, they deal with them on a daily basis. So I always praise my foster families and thank them all the time for what they do. Without them, our job wouldn't be successful.
So on the number of children in home, in March we had 33 and we're down to 5 in September. Why do we increase that?
So that would be like children that, like in-home cases. So, in in-home cases that we identify that there's concerns, but we can safely keep the kids home and we're working with the family on a voluntary basis to set up services. So I think it depends on kind of the situation. I can't really explain why we had such a decrease from, you know, January to
Why there was an increase then?
Well, I think so when we say that they're in home, it means that we're not opening a court case, we're not finding a dependency neglect case. So oftentimes caseworkers under the supervision of the supervisor will go in and safety plan with the family and leave the children in the home, but they're trying to mitigate any kind of continued, if there's drug exposure, that there's a social caretaker in the home and they're no longer exposed to it. So we're not having to file in court and open a case and carry it. These are things that legal counsel doesn't necessarily see within. And so when we're successful in safety planning and those people can get their lives and their household in order, then they fall off of those cases with us. So there's kind of a official case that we have in child welfare, and then there's a kind of non-official where we don't have a case, but there's continuing concerns, and so we work with the families to safety plan.
So in this particular case, more is way limited.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Lower is much better. It means we're getting them back into a family setting where there's no concerns of exposure or lack of work use or whatever it is. What's that? Or we open the case. That's the other thing too, where we haven't been successful in that. And so those cases now become a dependency neglect issue, and then legal has to file a dependency neglect case and open it. So we see those folks where they roll in or they do roll out. That's true. And I will add, there's a caveat though to the question you asked originally about the kinship reasons. One of the issues with Family First legislation is that, and again, it's a state and it's a financial issue. When we place a child with kin, we know that it's the best option for them to be successful. The issue with it is that when kin placement is not only certified towards foster care or kinship certification, if that family chooses not to go through the certification process within the first 90 days, or they start the certification with an extension of another 90 days for a total of 180 to certify. After that 180 or after that 90, if they refuse to certify, they no longer qualify under state and federal dollars, which means that us continuing that placement in kin is strictly on the county to keep that child in that placement. So any costs associated with that after the 90 days falls to the county specifically. So there's great pieces with Family First, and then there's areas where it creates barriers for our case managers on how they manage those families. There was a recent news article that I just saw out of California where children that are taken out of home, they're finding the same issue with the kin placement, and so they're constantly moving the children, and we know that when you constantly move children, it creates issues for them, and it becomes more and more difficult for that child to integrate back into the family. And so we find those cases traditionally stem to termination and then to some kind of permanency, so it's not always beneficial. The time frame set by the Family First legislation really makes case management much more difficult than it was in the past. So these guys have to get really creative on how they work with these families and how quickly we can get those kids returned to those families.
So there is the question that we debated when this legislation was going through the process, and the cry that we had worked closely, much closer with DHS directors and families. Because a lot of the legislation that comes to all of us, but you to execute, have absolutely no vetting from families and from specifically our DHS. And so later on in the conversation, maybe on a side chapter, I would like for you all to consider what amendments would you like maybe introduce that this group of county commissioners would at least propose legislation to create more flexibility, because we don't want to politicize the children. These kids are going through enough already. And now when you have legislation and a bill that says, jump 3 inches, well, you only did 2.5, therefore you don't need that. I think there has to be more of a sit down and the amendments could be, because I tell you one thing, this is the most expensive area for the state of Colorado when it comes to spending dollars, and yet it's not about money, it's about really having a process that works for the families, for the children, but for DHS departments.
Yeah, and the Family First, the federal legislation is what really has hindered us. I reported to the board several months ago about a concern that we were looking in January at a larger significant cut to the child block grant funding of around $67,000. That came from this very specific issue. Last year, the state deemed that there was a $19 million loss due to the penetration rate with the continued stay in kinship placement. So us throughout the state of Colorado, leaving those children past that 90 days, the federal legislation then said we're not reimbursing the state of Colorado for those kids that stayed past that 90 days. You're on your own. And so the state basically came in and said, look, we've got $19 million amongst all 64 counties. We're going to see another cut. We saw another cut to the tune of about $135,000 this year in child welfare and funding in our department alone. And so that kind of a cut really makes it much more difficult for these folks when that's a federal level issue. I agree, there needs to be more communication between us as a county and the state. And I have had a lot of conversation with state agents about that, our state liaisons, and we're requesting that there be more of that sit-down conversation with our state arm and partners. But the continued concern is when the federal government says you guys are not meeting these mandates, and so we're going to cut that funding, it trickles down, unfortunately. So the question is also, how do we get these continued bigger issues fixed? Is there a creative way to get past that? So right now, we're triaging it with these losses, but that also means less staff, less availability, less available foster homes. families. We have a real hard time recruiting foster parents to certify. Right now, I think we have 2 providers left.
Certified foster homes?
In Los Angeles, how many right now?
We have 6.
Oh, we have 6 left, that's right. Okay.
We have 6 on foster homes.
So that might be some discussion to bring up with our senators, our legislators, who can be for our roundtables. We can do that coming up now in January. And maybe that could be a topic I'll bring up. Usually, Mayor Rico will contact the chairman for questions and stuff. So maybe you two can figure out what we want to put in front of whoever wins the election between Senator Bennett and who might be in that place coming forward. But I think we need to probably work on that sooner than later and start addressing it at a local level to the state level representatives and international.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great benefits to the Family First legislation, and it really does focus on the children more than we've ever done. But with that comes some setbacks, because that legislation came through so quickly, doesn't necessarily mean the needs of the children in every capacity. And so now we're finding those areas where under that legislation it didn't necessarily do that. And so, yeah, we constantly have those conversations with our state agents about, we're facing another budget cut here, we're facing another issue with finding, providers, and how do we continue to support the work that these guys do every day, but more importantly, how do we keep those children safe in a placement that does not put them at risk. And so when there's, it does unfortunately boil down to money. When there's no money, how do we make this happen for them? So
So keep thinking on that perspective, and one of the questions for our local House Senate representatives, as we have them here. We're going to have access to them, I believe, fairly easy. Besides the vulnerability of children, like you really mentioned, going all over the place, their future is being fractured. And then that, at the end of the day, our communities fail because of a legislative process that was not well thought out. And again, it's communication. Adopting this legislation has to take into consideration the end result. But those of you in the trenches, your comments are a top priority. This is how we're going to execute step 1, 2, 3, and otherwise it's just a revolving door. So
yeah, and I will say that I will say for our state agencies that I reached out to recently about the breakdown of the communication, I've seen a much better response from them now. There were several rules that were on the table for our core program. Our core program is, of course, our family therapeutic services that we offer through child welfare. There were several rules that the department directors were very concerned with, that it would impact not just financially, but also it would tie our hands in many capacities. And the obligations were extreme for the counties. They've taken that rule back to draft. They are not looking to move forward at this time. And so we now are sitting on those committees that have county level say in those decisions, where we were not getting that before. We were basically kind of on the outskirts and told this is what's coming to deal with it. So the states, certain areas of the state have been very open to engaging us again in that. So I'm grateful for that piece. But and we realize that we're not going to get everything we want, but it is really, again, about having those truthful, authentic conversations around what is the end result that we're all trying to be and how do we get there together, not we're handing you just down and just figure it out.
what about for CCI's winter conference to have a round table that addresses this specific topic? From both the state and some directors, if that would be something that you think it would be, because the one that we had back on, when we went to Bill, we were at that particular breakout session, and I think it was well attended.
It was.
And we can put that as part of the CWAC, as part of the board as well. We can bring that in there and have a conversation to at least highlight and get it from the directors. Give the directors the platform to speak on the challenges that you're all facing when it comes to this enforcing A, federal, and B, state, and then work out in the middle. And it should be them last, because we're talking about our communities and the children that are just being shuffled from here to there. think about that, and let's, if you would think that you can get enough of participation in there, I'd be more than glad to organize, work with CCI staff to put one of the breakout sessions.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a piece we need. I've been in contact with the Colorado Human Services Directors Association, Director Lexi Kuznick, and we've had several conversations about the breakdown in communication between counties and state agencies. I know that there have been several communications made directly to those agencies at the state level from the association regarding the concerns about that. But we've also discussed at the CCI conference whether or not a round of discussion would be appropriate. So I think that is definitely something that, you know, the association is looking to have, hopefully, and make it a part of the agenda. And really, it should be a standing piece for every CCI conference, is that there's a county, state sit down and talk about those concerns and issues. I feel like in the past, this last conference was my first with physical attendance. It was very much, as a director, me getting everything from the state and not really getting a lot to get back in that. So I would rather see a more collaborative approach to that conference than what I saw at this last one.
Well, keep working on that, and we extend this to you if you need any assistance with CCI, please let us know, and let me know. I will be more than glad to take a phone call to do that on a breakout session. So I'll let you maneuver through that, and certainly you need my assistance, our assistance. We're there to support that because you know, it's just heartbreaking to see that the services are demanded, and now we're deficient in delivering aid because of the regulation that is just not in par with our kind of practices.
The date of that, I think it's the 5th of December.
Remember off the top.
I had
The 12th.
12th of December.
I think I'll just stay the whole weekend there at the conference and leave the day before Labor Day.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then, of course, as I mentioned, Ms. Garrison's out for personal today. So are there any questions on the numbers provided to you on her basically?
No, we just picked up for the month of September, 23 new cases. I don't have any questions. Okay. So at this time, I would like, since we have section 4A, subsection I, 2, 3, and 4, a motion to accept those numbers.
Motion to approve the case load counts by activities and activities by program.
Second motion.
Commissioner Hess?
Yes.
Commissioner Rizzo? Commissioner Felix?
Yes, so for the consideration of HCCC Hotline Communication Center MOU.
Commissioners, in front of you is our annual MOU agreement between us and the Powers County hotline. The hotline is our primary referral hotline for all child welfare reports of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. We also get some of our adults through there very rarely, but it's the majority of this is a state-wide hotline, so it's a universal hotline across the state. So in front of you is that agreement.
I believe Commissioner Andrade is very proud of this program in Broward County.
She shouts it from the rooftop every time that Council, do you have, I don't know if you already checked any concerns? Any more discussions from commissioners?
On page 3, it says information and referral to the non-secret and number 5 and 6. So does that take additional staff to man that position?
Say that again.
Does it take additional staff to man that position?
On which one are you looking at?
Page 3 on the MOU, number 5 and 6. It says here,
So primarily what happens is our staff are on a rotation of on-call. That's part of their standing job description. And so when those calls come through as a referral, they receive that through the hotline. The hotline sends that as an email correspondence, unless it's an emergency situation, then they call our cell phone directly. And then the case manager is notified, and then if it's emergency, they go out at that time. If it's, and then at that point, then there is an additional overtime for that piece because it is off the clock. But usually if it's something that we can manage in red team the next day, then we pull that referral down and handle that during red team during the normal business day.
What is in your red team means, maybe I know you mentioned that was before.
Red team meets at this point pretty much daily, at this point sometimes twice a day because of the number of referrals we're getting now. When I got on, if we did a referral once a week, again, it was too much. 3 years later now, we're looking at sometimes 2 red teams a day with multiple referrals. So it's quite heavy and expensive for us. Any other questions?
LACBCC, Hotline Communication Center.
Second.
Commissioner Resources?
Yes.
Commissioner Hess?
Yes.
Commissioner Resources?
Yes. 4C, consideration of child welfare computer refresh, IGA.
So Commissioners, in front of you there is a proposed contract or intergovernmental agreement between us and the state of Colorado Child Welfare Division. We go through a refresh process, meaning that we get new computers to update our current technology in each unit. We just went through a refresh in our income maintenance department, or economic security department now. This is a proposed one for January. However, legal and I have reviewed this contract, and there are a couple of areas of concern that I have with this agreement that I want to bring to your attention. First and foremost, page 6, item 3. You will see that there is a statement that says, if the state terminates this agreement in the public interest, the county shall pay the state the amount established in the exhibits of this agreement. One, the amounts were never attached to this contract as part of the exhibit. That was set separately. There is a dollar amount tied to Los Angeles County that if in the interest the state deems in the public interest it is not liable for the state to pay for this computer refresh, for the county would be liable for the full amount, is the way that I interpret that. Legal, is that still your interpretation of that?
Yes, but it's hard without those exhibits.
Yeah.
What's the dollar amount
That's,
that we don't know?
The dollar amount was sent to us after that dollar amount is roughly between $14,000 and $16,000.
so you did receive the exhibit.
It was sent completely separate. It was never part of the attached IGA agreement.
So to cure that statement, what is the recommendation?
Well, I will say there are other counties that are having the same kind of heartburn over this piece because we feel that there were several areas as well during the last IGA meeting that I questioned on this. One of them is HP is our primary go-to for the technology. They have established a set rate for the technology per person, per unit. So last time I believe we received 10. The locked-in, the rate that is proposed per technology piece, so that's a tower, computer monitors, whatever. I asked if that amount was also locked in with HP and would not fluctuate at any point due to inflation or shipping costs or whatever. The state said they're working closely with HP to ensure that doesn't happen, but it's not a guarantee, so that rate is also not a locked-in rate right now.
So let me go back to section 3. If state terminates this agreement in the public interest, the county shall pay the state. But have they also underlined the when?
Yes, so if every county were to sign the IGA, refresh will happen in January. So that means by December, a payment will be made to HP for the allotted amount of technology that.
For how many years is this refresh?
It's usually every 3 years.
Okay, so if the county was to suspend that agreement within the 3 years, regardless of, then the county shall pay back the state the amount that you're stating,
Correct.
$16,000.
Correct.
Have you reached out to Michelle Barnes regarding this concern?
No. These concerns were brought up as our directors are going through their board meetings, and so the directors stay very connected in communication with concerns, and so this was a concern brought by another county that their board had concerns with, and so I'm bringing it to you all before we move forward.
Is there a time frame that we have to enter into this agreement?
Well, the state is requesting that it be done before November 1. So that's why it's on the agenda. However, my concern is again, if we move forward with this, and for some reason we come across that concern, I don't know how likely it would be, but it's still a concern that then the county would be on the hook for that full amount. at any given
The
time.
full amount may be 16,000 possibly behind them, right? So
And I will also add, Commissioners, that during the calculation of the allotted technology, there was a miscalculation at the state level to the tune of $1.6 million over. So they had to go back and readjust that number down. So they pulled their data from OIT, which is our Office of Information Technology, the Governor's Office. The data sent when it was ran was incorrect. And so they were underestimating the cost by 1.6 million. So they had to increase the cost statewide by 1.6 to get all the technology back out.
Well, and it also makes a reference agreement, means this agreement including all attached exhibits, which we don't have.
Correct. Correct.
Have you received the additional exhibits?
All I received is the allocation sheet. I do not know what other exhibits are attached to this IGA.
Well, I think personally, I don't know what my fellow commissioners would think that we can probably have a special meeting to approve this and give you enough time between now and November, the end of October, to work through your DHS directors to see if we can come up with all the exhibits we want to see. And then also as far as this payment. Because it has to be prorated. To me, if it's a 3-year agreement and the computer is worth $1,000, I don't know, depreciation, I haven't done that for a while, but I think over a 3-year period, I'm thinking 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So not necessarily paying the entire amount, but rather a depreciated amount over the length of the contract.
Correct. Correct. And that's not in here. The other major concern that both legal and I have is on page 23, item 13. It's regarding the dismissal of a county employee. The state shall notify county at any time, regardless of whether county is in breach, with a recommendation to immediately remove any of the county employees, agents, and subcontractors from work whom the state in its sole discretion deems incompetent. And legal, correct me if I'm missing this, but the concern, can you clarify that a little bit more?
So it's not clear if they mean removal of use of the equipment or removal as an employee. So we're not sure exactly what they're trying to accomplish with that.
So we don't know if that means you're going to take the technology back, or does that just mean that we cut somebody off if they're no longer employed?
So I agree with Commissioner Cancel regarding going back to your fellow DHS directors, the state of Colorado, Mrs. Barnes, and get this stuff figured out and then present it to the board. I can't make a decision based on what ifs and maybes and attachments we don't see.
And I would rather, when these kind of issues come up and those types of discussions among the directors, even if I bring it to you, I want you to be aware of what other counties are seeing and what other areas that legal has concerns with, because I'm not going to enter into an agreement, even though you all approve it, it's my signature on that agreement, and that means I've committed us to that.
And the other concern I have is the 14 to 16,000, is that going to be deemed this year, next year, or the following year that we have to pay it back, because I don't want to allocate funds for the next 3 years for future commissioners to inherit a debt that we don't have money for, and if the economy changes.
And I will say this is the first time in the history of this refresh that we've ever seen an IG like this. We have never had anything brought to the table like this, and again, this is one of those situations where communication with the county would have been beneficial to have up front before this IGA was delivered.
Yeah. With the administration we have, nothing surprises me.
If council, maybe perhaps there would be an opportunity to send a recommended language, because see, as you mentioned, your section 13 state rights of removal, they're making a reference, and now that would be an overreach of authority, now removing an employee from your operation simply because we agreed to this paragraph. So let's keep working on it. I don't know that, as you're saying, that this is the only county, but I would imagine that it's creating a little bit of harbor statewide.
I would assume that many of the counties were not aware of these items in there. Once you kind of look at them a little bit deeper, you start to question that, and so it is concerning. And so, again, even though I have it as a consideration based off of these items that were brought to my attention right now, I would ask the board not to consider this for a pass. We need to definitely go back and have some discussion with the state on this before we move forward with that. But by not taking a position on it today and approving it, then I'm hoping that that will give us some leverage as directors to meet with the state and say that we really need to clarify this language in more in depth so that we feel comfortable with it.
And, you know, I want to put this for the record, because one of the things that the resolution of controversies, yes, we know they have to be resolved. They have 10 days here for us to remedy whatever situation or solution that we're going to agree to. But this, once again, it goes back to the statement that I gave to CDPHE last Friday, when it's good. Commissioners don't work so well when you mandate without any heads up, without any forward notice. But when you tell us, the message came from one agency, from the governor's office, it was paid, and then it went to the state, a local, a different entity that received a whole different message, and now we get the third message. We're in the middle. So I think this whole thing warrants clarification before we say, let's move on with that. So I think, council, your guidance and assessment on this particular contract is greatly appreciated. So having said all that,
Motion to table.
yes, sir.
Commissioners, is that the appropriate recommendation? Would it not be indifferent?
They're not ready to approve it today, so they're not ready, so they would table it. And hopefully Mr. Aragon will bring back a revised version. after
Revised
the
version.
state's bid.
So the revised version would not have to be reconsidered through a table motion. Okay.
CPHE's heard it over and over again, more this is it.
Well, and again, Commissioners, this goes back to a discussion we had last meeting and last meeting before, is, and even today, is that continued concern of the state is handing us documentations in here, do this, and there is no county input on that. There is no understanding that a decision like this, how it impacts us as a county, who is very fiscally responsible for how we spend that money, versus a smaller county who may not have that kind of fund balance or that kind of mill levy in place. These types of decisions would bankrupt a county with those types of, and this is a kind of an extreme example. This is not something that would bankrupt, but it definitely could impact the decision on how case managers work with families. When I have to allocate, $15,000 over and decide, do I put computers for my staff to use to document their concerns in the family? Or do I put them overtime to go out on an emergency situation? I shouldn't have to make those kind of calls.
And I'll second your motion to table.
Commissioner Hess?
Yes.
Commissioner Reese?
Yes.
Commissioner Felix?
Yes. Section 5, financial reports, consideration of financials as of August 31st, 2022. Mr. Herrick.
Commissioner, as I do understand, and I did receive your message, thank you for getting back to me. I would like to set some time with you and our accountant to go through a better reporting piece, but in front of you today is our August numbers. Our current revenue in taxes for the month of August was $37,841.91. Our year-to-date revenue is $820,032.30. Our year-to-date revenue on our state and federal programming comes out to $1,309,167.44. That does include different taxes in there as well. Our year-to-date is $11,354,327.48.
So when we're looking at year-to-date county share.
So our year-to-date county share, as of right now, is $487,832.91. But keep in mind of that, we still have over-the-counter payments that will be coming out last quarter. Sometimes those are substantial, so we will probably see some of that pass through as well. So we won't have a true line on the county share until after we close out December to see where we landed.
And from the projected to the current county share,
far as programming goes, I do think one area that we may see a slight overspend, which we did last year as well, was child welfare. Again, we took a $67,000 cut in January. We did try to offset some of that with cost, but we're also seeing an increased number in referrals and the in-home work that we're doing there. So I do think that that might be one area. And then child support, obviously the 34%, that is a pretty hefty amount as well. And so for 23, we made adjustments on that budget to support that better.
Will we offset some of that if you have incentive funds coming in?
Yes, if we have incentive. Now, that's with the child support piece. As far as child welfare, there is really no incentive. What I will do though is file for mitigation again. I did file for mitigation last year. We did not receive any mitigation funds. The mitigation funding statewide was only $2.9 million between 64 counties. It's not a whole lot to pass around.
Again, current administration.
Questions or concerns, Commissioners? on the financials?
No, thank you. You answered, I think, on the financial, and once again, I really appreciate, we appreciate that one first page is, it tells the story pretty well. Commissioners, any other discussion, any questions? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the financials of August 31st, 2022.
Second motion. Commissioner Hess? Yes. Commissioner Luis Lopez?
Yes.
Commissioner Felix Lopez?
Yes, 5B, consideration of bills for August 2022. Mr. Herrera.
Commissioners, the total amount for August 2022 for our accounts payable bills was $30,686.94.
And you know, I'm really looking forward to sitting up with you and your finance. I think and I don't know that, I have a couple of ideas to share because there's a lot of information here. Once again, and you have the summary on page, I think you have the summary of the bills and payroll, but some of that information, I kind of want to collapse it.
Certainly.
Okay?
Absolutely.
Very good. Commissioners, questions? Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve of the bills for August 2022.
Second.
Commissioner Luis Lopez?
Yes.
Commissioner Hess? Yes. Commissioner Felix Lopez?
Yes. We will, Section 6, payroll report, consideration of payroll for pay date August 15, 2022. Do you have access to the pages where those are at?
Yes.
Okay, so August 15, 2022.
Okay. You want the totals on this? Yes. So the total amount on there is $82,983.51. I included page numbers on the bottom. So there's 40.
Questions, commissioners? 82,983 for 2022. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve payroll for pay date August 15th, 2022.
Consideration of payroll for pay date August 31st, 2022.
Commissioners?
Oh, I'm sorry. Second and a vote. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Hess?
Yes.
Commissioner Luis Lopez?
Yes.
Commissioner Felix Lopez?
That's the good direction to be there, yes. Okay, consideration of payroll for pay date August 31st, 2022.
Commissioners, the total payroll for August 31st, 2022 was $88,488.70.
Question, discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval of payroll for pay date August 31st, 2022.
Second.
Commissioner Luis Lopez? Commissioner Hess? Yes. Commissioner Felix Lopez?
Yes, 6C, consideration of payroll for pay date September 15, 2022.
Commissioners, the total amount for payroll for September 15, 2022 was $81,436.78.
Discussion? Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve payroll for pay date September 15th, 2022.
Second motion.
Commissioner Hess?
I'm trying to flip all these pages, they're upside down.
I wish the packets were a lot less, but unfortunately, I mean, you guys have all the information.
Yes.
Commissioner Eastman?
Yes.
Commissioner Eastman?
Yes, and item 60, consideration of payroll for pay day September 30th, 2022, Mr. Herrera.
Commissioners, the payroll amount for September 30th, 2022 was $84,376.71.
Discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the payroll for pay day September 30th, 2022.
Second.
Commissioner Eastman? Commissioner Hess?
Yes.
Commissioner Eastman?
Yes. Any other discussion? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Please, the San Luis County Board of County Commissioners, acting on the capacity of human services.
Motion to adjourn, second, third, yes, yes, and yes.
Commissioner Hess?
Yes.
Commissioner Eastman?
Yes.
Commissioner Eastman?
Yes. And thank you, Mr. Herrera.
Thank you, Chairman. I would make a motion to re-enter our regular session of Board of County Commissioners at this time.
Second motion.
Commissioner Hess?
Yes.
Commissioner Eastman?
Yes.
Commissioner Eastman?
Yes. So at this time, we're going to go into executive session. Section 9 of the regular Board of County Commissioners meeting, the board will meet in executive session under CRS 24642 4A, the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interest. Item A, Larry Stokes. CRS 24642 4B, confirmed with the county attorney for purposes of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions. Senate Bill 15-288, and B, corporate tax, DTR. May I have a motion to go into executive session?
Move to go into executive session.
For the temporary recess, second.
Commissioner Eastman?
Yes.
Commissioner Hess? Yes. Commissioner Eastman?
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Recording stopped.
Flipping those pages, so I did it last time.
I tell you what, Dave, they're better than those packets I